Hi Daniel, thank you for joining Opus 93.
For sure, thank you.
So let's just get to the meat of things and talk about what's coming up for you.
Well, coming up this Friday on the 30th is Synchrony at the Russian Hall. So for me, it'll be the premiere of a reed trio that I wrote last fall for a group called the Vientos Trio, which is a Los Angeles-based group. And I'll also be showing my art show called Idiosyncratic Art. So the back part of the gallery, the back part of the hall we're going to convert into a gallery. And I have a number of easels that we're going to set up, and I'll be showing my paintings as well.
So talk a little bit about Synchrony. Talk about that project and how it's connected and who the musicians are and how the composers work with the musicians, and about that very interesting project that you do here in LA.
Sure. Synchrony is actually a composers collective, so we're not at this point a performance ensemble. And we mostly work with other performance organizations. So last fall we worked with a group called Conundrum. The upcoming concert is with the Vientos Trio, and in May we're working with Midnight Winds. We collaborated with a group called the Symbiosis Chamber Orchestra, and also with Music on Argyle last January in a concert called Listening Alive. So we're a group of 6 composers who put on programs together. We have a concert season together. We're currently becoming a nonprofit organization, and we're actually starting a performance ensemble, but it hasn't quite been launched at this point.
It's good to see that new music is alive and going in LA, because at times I feel like it doesn't work well in certain, even major cities where you would think it would work. It's nice to see that musicians do these kind of projects in LA. So how do you combine art and music, or do you combine them, or is it 2 separate things for you?
You know, they don't feel like separate things. Painting like a piece, it sucks you in the same way as writing a piece of music does, and so they feel very similar. As far as combining them, there isn't really like a piece that incorporates both music and art that I've done so far, but I'm trying to present them together, and I'm trying to show that these are different parts of the same thing, basically, and different parts of my personality, essentially. And I'm also trying to, like, art and music are not just 2 separate things, but they're also 2 separate communities. So we have here in Los Angeles the music community, go to concerts. The new music community is even more exclusive, I guess. But on the other hand, we have the art community. We have all the art walks and the galleries, and it's like this whole other community. So a lot of what I want to do in terms of combining art and music is I want to bring music to the art community, and I want to bring art to the music community.
And it's also, it might be interesting to work with some other fields in art, like, you know, maybe it'll be nice to see, although ballet does this kind of thing, maybe it'll be nice to see some modern dance with music and some theater performances. Is that possible?
Absolutely.
Have you thought about that?
Synchrony is actually very interested. We're very interested in doing this, where we're showing my paintings in March, but we want to start showing artists at all of our concerts, artists and groups of artists. In May, we're actually working with a dance company called Lineage Dance, and it's a organization in Pasadena, and so it's kind of an experiment this first time. We're going to have one piece where it's a woodwind quintet concert, and we're going to have the dancers in one of the pieces. But the whole idea is that this is kind of a test run for a big dance show next season. So
what do you say to people who think of contemporary music, the music of the 21st century, as just an academic form? It doesn't really have that same passion as the music of the Romantic or classical periods. What do you say to those people? Because for me and for you, I'm sure, and for many other musicians who are interested in new music, it's not only academic, but it has the passion, it has the energy. How would we get those people to listen to this, or what would you tell those people?
It's very complicated because you can go through music school as a composer especially, and you can get the idea that music is only very academic, that there's this kind of modernist dogma that's still kind of hovering over us that we can't get past. But when you go outside of school and you start going to concerts, you find that that's not actually the rule in the concert hall. The rule of music today is that anything goes. And what you actually see is you see wide variety, and you even expect wide variety even on a single program. You expect each piece to be widely different from the last. So in terms of like seeing music as this obscure intellectual exercise, that sort of mentality of music has kind of died away, but people don't realize it yet if you only experience music through the lens of music school. Mm-hmm. There's, I don't know, a kind of movement that's happening, mostly based in New York, but it's happening here in Los Angeles as well. And it's this situation where the established classical music groups are not interested in new music. They've sort of become more of a historical organization. And so as a result, there's no opportunities, and it's all very separate. We have the composers, and then we have the classical music community, and they're very separate from one another. And what has happened is it's compelled, like having no opportunities has compelled composers to form their own opportunities. And so what we have composers starting, collectives like Synchrony, starting ensembles, collaborating with various performers. Performers have been doing this for a long time, where they're used to starting ensembles. But now we have a tradition of organizing amongst composers that's sort of exploding and taking off. So we have this creation of an alternative musical universe, since the existing musical universe is ignoring us. And that's very exciting, I think.
I want to know about your mentors or your teachers that have influenced such a unique approach to music and unique style of composition for you.
I feel like my approach is unique in that it can't be, traced back to my music education. Although I have, I have actually gone to music school and I'm getting my master's in music and all this. I guess I can credit the teacher Jerry Mueller, who was somebody I met when I was very young in San Francisco. He was a composer. He started a group called the 5C Composers Collective and gave me some of my first opportunities. But my perspective as a composer has always been, okay, so I've decided that I'm going to write music. How do I go about doing this? I go about it by looking for performance organizations to collaborate with. And so I had this in my head that I'm going to learn to be a composer by writing pieces for groups, and then we're going to put on lots of shows. And that sort of was my mentality before I ever went to music school, and music school was meant to kind of supplement my work as a composer. But it was never this idea that I went to music school to become a composer, and that I'm going to be taught how to be a composer. And I feel like this perspective is what has made me unique in terms of how I organize my pieces.
Do you participate in your performances, or do you let others do the work and you kind of enjoy, which is actually sometimes harder to just sit back and enjoy something you've created. Sometimes you hear the things that shouldn't be there and just...
Yeah, you get used to it. I've had so many dozens of performances at this point that I know it's not going to be perfect, and you have to just kind of let it be, I don't participate in terms of I'm a performer. Oftentimes I'll come up and speak about my music. I like to tell everybody who I am, and I feel like the context of the program and the personality of the composer and the identity of the composer informs how we hear the music. So I try to set people up to hear it in a meaningful way.
Are there great composers today as they were in the past, in the Romantic and the Classical era in the 20th century? Are there great composers of the 21st century now? There
are. I think John Adams is a great composer. I listen to a lot of American music, but it's mostly a political statement that I've decided that this is the kind of music that I want to make, and so I listen to it because it's the right environment for my own music. in terms of contemporary music, it seems like I would almost even rather listen to music by the people in my community, the composers here in Los Angeles, who may not have the status of great composers, more so than the established composers of today.
In your studies, what composers from the past have you analyzed and learned about the most, and which one is the closest to you, even if they're from the Romantic or the Baroque era?
My greatest affinity is with composers of the early 20th century. So I'm very inspired by composers like Benjamin Britten and Prokofiev and Shostakovich, Darius Milhaud, Ravel. I love The Planets by Holst. I love a lot of pieces that often get ignored by academia because they come at a time when modernism became really huge and music was supposed to be very technical and complex and intellectual, and these composers were kind of rebelling against that trend with their own music.
So you said you like American music. Do you incorporate those American folk tradition or style in your music? Is that how's your music incorporate that?
I don't know if you can call it folk, but certainly there's something American about my music.
Okay.
A lot of my music is very jazzy, or more particular, I incorporate elements of blues into my music. So there are certain gestures that seem pretty fundamentally American, but it's more, I guess, an aesthetic. Americans like, for lack of a better word, they like very pretty music, or Americans like music that's perhaps more populist-oriented or accessible.
What are some unique approaches in your music? I mean, you know, some composers have a very specific interest in using extended techniques. Others have this, you know, like we talked about, the folk use of folk in their music. You know, all these different approaches to music. What do you have?
I mean, there is. I write a lot of music, so I tend to proliferate pieces, and I just kind of go from project to project, and my pieces are written in kind of a series. So each project is kind of an answer to the last project, and in each time I'm like trying to create the same ideal, but I'm trying to take it a little bit further. So there's a process of evolution in my music. In the past, maybe year and a half, it's all been about this very particular blues-like gesture. It's this gesture of a descending line that shifts chromatically downwards as it descends, so it inflects it further downwards in its descent. And my music is also very counterpoint driven, so when this gesture kind of descends, it also shifts into a dissonance with its counterpart. And this kind of gesture I've become almost obsessed with in my pieces, where it started off as kind of a germ or cell in a one piece, and then I liked it, and it became something important to my music, and pretty soon it started taking over my music, and this gesture came to define the whole series in the past 2 years.
It's great because with classical musicians and jazz musicians, we always see these different periods where composers go through certain periods in their life where they incorporate a certain thing for a period of time, and then, you know, they let it go maybe, and then they start doing something else, and we've seen this with jazz musicians. Now, I know orchestral music in the 21st century is somehow non-existent. New composers don't compose for orchestras because orchestras don't perform it, because the audiences don't listen to new music. And how has this affected your compositional style? Do you want to compose for orchestra but you don't because there's no one to perform it?
I mean, that's the case for most composers. The reason composers are writing for small ensembles is because we can easily organize small ensembles and we can put on shows, and the orchestras just are not interested in new music or music from inside our community, or music that I guess represents an identity for our community. But sure, I would love to write for the orchestra, absolutely.
Any experiments at trying to write for an orchestra?
Yeah, I have, but mostly I can't write pieces that aren't for something in particular.
Yeah.
Usually I need to know the musicians that I'm writing for, and it actually greatly affects how I write the music when I know the personality of the performers that I'm writing for. But it has to be for some event where we're working it up for a premiere, and even if the future of the piece is uncertain, where I'll be taking it around to different groups and to different opportunities, that first sort of event has to be focused for me. And also because there's so many opportunities with chamber music, it's kind of like I would have to neglect my existing opportunities to write theoretical pieces for the orchestra.
So I know you've composed some compositions for the voice.
Mm-hmm.
How is this different than composing for instruments?
Well, it's because with the voice it's all about the text. So it's text setting. And there's, especially in the English language, there's a system of accents in the language where we have accented syllables and we have non-accented syllables, and it comes across with this very rhythmic kind of way of speaking that we have. So when this gets translated into music, the best thing is to look for the natural musical lines that already exist in the text. So instead of trying to invent lines, it becomes about trying to discover lines that are there already and to bring them out.
So what are some hobbies that you do outside of music? I know you're busy with a lot of different projects in LA. You're an active composer and organizer of groups and events, but what are some other things that you do? Some composers do some sports or physical activity. What do you do? Is there something that you do outside music?
Well, the most obvious one is that I'm a painter.
Yeah.
And in particular, I've been preparing for this show, Idiosyncratic Art, and so I've been spending the last 5 months obsessing on painting. But it's something I've also been doing for years. But other than that, I have actually a strong interest in the labor movement and in organizing in terms of that. And I have some background and experience with that as well.
So this next question is something I ask of every composer, and if you watch the shows, you know I ask this question at every interview that I do. How do you compose? Is there a specific time and schedule for your compositions, or do you just compose whenever you feel like it?
My compositions require immersion. So I'll get up and I start a piece, and once it's started, it's essentially finished in that I won't be able to tear myself away from it after that. And so usually it's a case where once I get something going, I'll say, okay, I've created enough for today, I'm going to leave it and I'm going to relax, but I'll just listen to it one more time. And so I'll listen to it one more time and say, well, I should actually change this one part, and then I'll put it away. But changing that one part makes me think of this other part that goes with it. I'll just write that down real quick before stopping. Maybe I'll listen to it one more time. And in this way, it kind of propels itself forward, and it becomes something that I can't stop. And if I do stop, I'll keep going in my mind, and I'll keep thinking about it, and I won't be able to think about other things until it's finished. And so I don't usually have a problem making myself finish things, because my pieces practically write themselves. It's all a matter of starting the piece. That's the trick.
Yeah, start is definitely a hard thing. So Daniel, tell me about the next project that you have, which is on Friday. What's the date? What's the time? Who is it with? And all that good stuff.
So the project on Friday is a synchrony concert called Synchrony at the Russian Hall. The Russian Hall is 2041 Argyle Avenue. The best thing to do is to go to synchronymusic.org, or else to go to my website, danielgall.com. And all the details will be on there. You can order tickets, but it should be a great show. We have music all by Los Angeles composers, by 4 of the Synchrony composers, Jason Baraba, Jenny Brandon, Vera Ivanova, and myself. And then we have 3 guest composers, Jennifer Stevenson, who's also one of the performers on the program, also Damien Rokonjak, and Dante De Silva, I believe, yes.
Thank you, Daniel, for joining Opus 93. We hope to have you again, maybe after the concerts or next year, to talk about this.
Great, thanks for having me.